My cousin and I. In 1985, my cousin lived in Toledo, Ohio. We were instant friends, the way you are when you are little and discover you are related. She looked a lot like me, but she had an accent. Her vowels sounded different from mine, and her lao was impeccable. She was great at cussing, and I followed her lead, even though I was older than her by a few months. It was a hot summer night in July. We were inseparable. Earlier in the day, we had snuck into her brother's bedroom and found a box of his love letters. Girls wrote to him, confessed their love and desires, gave him their pictures, the ones taken at school and fit perfectly into your wallet. I wondered what it felt like to be loved like that. I never got letters like those before, and no one gave me a photograph. I would get punched and have my hair pulled, and I had to be the one who fought back, who punched harder, who pulled hair until I could come away with a bunch in my hand. No one messed with me. I took a punch to mean it was a punch. I was that way. My cousin and I laughed at how those girls loved her brother so much, how they wished he would call them on the phone, how they were hurt when he passed them in the hallway and said nothing. The world ended for those girls with the things he did, and their every happiness depended on what he didn't. I liked reading these letters. They were not my feelings, and I was just a few years away from truly understanding what this would feel like. After we grew tired of reading her brother's love letters, there were so many, we went to the room next to the kitchen and looked at the worms they kept in a second fridge. There were boxes and boxes of them. That's what our parents did for a living then, picked worms. I don't know where the adults were at the time, probably over at someone's house. There were actually a lot of people around, but for some reason they weren't at the house that evening. It wasn't unusual for everyone to be a few houses down having dinner, or maybe they were there and we didn't notice them in our world. That evening, not wanting to be apart and talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up, we lay there in the dark together, just two little voices giggling. We were in her parents' bedroom. At some point, I felt a box under the bed and wondered what it was, what was in there. Because it was dark and I was tired, I thought I would find out about it later, and I fell asleep. The next day, with my cousin by my side, I went to find that box under the bed, and inside was a metal revolver. I had never seen a gun in real life before. I picked it up, and like the cowboys in movies, I pointed it at her. I pulled the trigger once. Once I pulled the trigger. It had been fully loaded, but one. Someone hadn't bothered with that one. That one. Her father was told about what I had done, and that afternoon he yelled at me, at my curiosity and wonder, and at my stupidity. To be that age, 7, and not know what a fucking gun is. I did not know why a man would keep a gun in his house, what he would be afraid of, why he felt someone was coming for him. I would know this many, many years later. It would be a phone call at 3 in the morning. We were told he was dead. It was nothing original. We've all heard it before. An affair, a husband who wanted revenge. Today, my cousin is alive. She is married and has 2 boys. One is going to college this year. She is what I would want for her. She's happy. I haven't seen her in a long time, and I think of her often, who we are, and what might have happened if things had turned out a different way. How narrow and close those 2 things are. First of all, I never write anything I don't want to. I begin with that. That's the first editorial decision I make as a writer. I never write anything I don't want to. I think a lot about how people pre-read me as a writer. I know what I look like. I know what I sound like. I know the instant someone sees my name, what that might mean to them. And if they know anything about my biography, they know that I was born in a refugee camp. When they know that, I feel as the writer like I'm writing under a heavy rock, in that I have to undo how people pre-read me. One of the things when you hear about a writer being born in a refugee camp is that you automatically assume that whatever they write is going to be tragic, sad. And in some ways, a reader might pity the writer when they enter into the text. And if there's one thing I just absolutely hate, is other people's pity.
I often feel a bit like a diplomat to that text in a way, just sort of trying to understand the things that it is doing and why. I ask a lot of questions when I'm editing. That's kind of the basis of my process as an editor, is to just ask the writer sort of what their thoughts are for a sentence, what their thoughts are for a particular choice of phrasing, while at the same time balancing with those rules of English grammar.
I pulled the trigger. It had been fully loaded, but one. Someone hadn't bothered with that one. That one. She screamed, telling me the gun was real. She told her father right away about what I had done, and that afternoon he yelled at me, at my curiosity and wonder, and at my stupidity. I pulled the trigger once. Once I pulled the trigger. It had been fully loaded, but one. Someone hadn't bothered with that one. That one. Her father was told about what I had done, and that afternoon he yelled at me, at my curiosity and wonder, and at my stupidity.
I notice there in the earlier version, you had a bit of narrative description to say she screamed, telling me the gun was real. And that ended up getting snipped away. And in place of that, there was a greater attention to the use of repetition. And maybe you had some intention for that part with that revision.
That sentence, she screamed, telling me the gun was real. That sentence is actually redundant. but I didn't want it to be redundant in terms of meaning or visually. The way that I wanted the text to repeat was within the word one. Someone, one, once, done, wonder. I wanted those sounds to be there.
And you even went from an active, she told her father right away about what I had done, to the passive, her father was told about what I had done. You remove her even from the moment after that trigger was pulled, which I found really interesting. There's a real emotional depth to that. The subject is gone from this fraught moment.
I'm aware of my own voice. I know that in real life, I sound like a little girl. I play with it and I also work against it. One of the joys of this particular piece is when I get to the line where I get to swear. When I say this line out loud, I feel a little giddy, like when I get to the line, to be that age, 7, and not know what a fucking gun is. I did intend it to be just one paragraph. I thought of it as the text being like a frame for a photograph we can't see. And so that visual cue within that frame, once we enter, we can't exit. There's too little time in the piece to exit, to look away. I just like that we get to a new sentence. It takes us, it turns and it flips, and we're just kind of caught in its universal world, or the world that it's pulled us into. There's a kind of intimacy in the squareness of the text, in that once we enter, we don't feel that we can take a break, and then it moves so fast near the end. I feel like I don't let go until I get to the very last sentence. There are decisions that I understand when an editor suggests them, that they are editorially correct, that the grammar is correct in their suggestions. But sometimes when we hear a voice, what makes it real is the parts that are not correct, that sound awkward, that sound unusual. And those parts, I work really hard to keep in there.
I've had words that the poet Tim Lilburn said in a class many years ago, almost like a tossed off phrase, where he was entreating us to not colonize the text. That is the one thing that you mustn't do as the outside reader, as an editor, as a workshopper, as someone who's putting their mind and their eye on another person's piece and offering suggestions for it. So that has been my guiding sentence, to not put yourself into someone else's text, not to assume that it becomes something that it's not, to really listen very closely to what it's trying to do. And so that feels like the most important thing to me.